Good morning, everyone. Today we're talking about scriptural investigations and how they can improve. Like we've seen in court, and I will never miss an opportunity to say this, that they hide behind clergy penitent privilege. And the problem with this clergy penitent privilege is that when a child takes the incredibly terrifying step of confiding in someone that they've been told explicitly to trust about a distressing or abusive situation, they are not a sinner in need of spiritual guidance and rebuke. They are not a penitent. They are not guilty until proven innocent as a victim. We are not in a third world hovel of the country, and I will never miss an opportunity to say that because it's disgusting that they even make this an argument. Okay, moving on. Point 2. Their scriptural investigation requires that they have 2 witnesses, which is all well and fine if I hadn't seen interviews where elders have literally said to media people that scripturally they can't do anything unless they have 2 witnesses, which explains why they have a very big habit of not reporting, even when it is mandated. Because there's those cases too. They can tell you anything they want, but there's cases where they didn't report when there were multiple witnesses. I personally know of a few myself. But, so if they don't have a if they don't have a legal mandate to report without the 2 witnesses, they're definitely not doing it. Unless you got a rogue elder, which y'all are my heroes. Keep doing what you do. Report away. You're my heroes. Sorry, it's more early. Now, with these scriptural investigations, the problem with them is that everything that they are legally and morally and educationally qualified to do can be done from the visitor's side of a prison table or glass, whatever the situation works. Everything that they can do, I'm going to repeat this, they are able to do from the visitor side of a table, minus holding a publisher hostage in the back room of a kingdom hall while they browbeat them trying to get a confession for something that they may or may not have done, which is abusive and probably illegal in some jurisdictions. You might want to check into that because you're putting people in a double bind and holding their family hostage. It's kind of terroristic. Just saying. But there's this thing about the scriptural investigations because they wouldn't need a scriptural investigation if a sister showed up at the Kingdom Hall and started showing. They wouldn't need a scriptural investigation or 2 witnesses or a confession if all of a sudden she's growing a baby belly. It wouldn't have to happen that way. They're going to ask her to the back room, and everybody in the world could be oblivious to the fact that she even sat in a car in service with a male member of the human race. And she shows up pregnant. And we're not looking at a scenario where we have no witnesses, we have no confession. So even though she's pregnant, we can't do anything. That sister is definitely getting disfellowshipped, not only because there's this irrefutable evidence, but because if she had gotten to that point without confessing to the elders, she's obviously not repentant. So she's definitely getting disfellowship. You don't need any of the other qualifiers scripturally. Why does this matter? When we extrapolate Bible scriptures and verses and things like that to make up these rules as Jehovah's Witnesses, it matters because of the blood doctrine. How does that apply, really? Let me tell you. Because the blood doctrine came from a scripture that says not to partake in blood, not to eat blood. They were able, from like a handful of scriptures, to say not only do you not eat blood, but you cannot participate in blood medicine. You can't get a transfusion. You can take parts of a transfusion, but you can't take a transfusion. And some parts are okay and some parts aren't. And somehow or other, from a few different scriptures, they were able to extrapolate this out into a whole new set of rules that had nothing to do with these scriptures except for blood. You don't partake in it, none of it should be okay. But they have exceptions and exceptions and exceptions. And some are okay and some isn't. They were able to go that far and delve into the medical world to establish a lot of rules. How does that relate to a pregnant sister, an unwed pregnant sister, being disfellowshipped and not even requiring a real investigation at that point? I'll tell you why. Because that baby itself, that fetus, that little new life growing right there in itself is a DNA test. His DNA met her DNA and they made this thing, and depending on when ovulation happens or like what contraceptives were used, and a very low odds, like maybe 30% of a fertilized egg actually implanting and surviving long enough to produce a positive DNA test, let alone positive pregnancy test, let alone make it to 10 weeks and get a heartbeat. Like, there's a lot of odds that this could be wrong. It is a very rudimentary test. Let me try and get into this parking spot. And yet, without question, they are perfectly okay with taking that evidence and that DNA evidence alone to disfellowship somebody and take away their entire support system when she needs it most. When she's got a child in need of, for the child's sake, in need of support for her own sanity and safety and for her sake. I mean, for heaven's sake, what happens if she ends up with like postpartum blues or something. Like, that is a very dangerous condition to be contending with alone. But you know, you're going to take away all her support when she needs it most. And that's okay based on your rudimentary DNA test. But you're not going to use any other DNA tests. Ever. Ever. Because somebody else who's more qualified has to do it. Yet you're going to make rules about a medical world that you barely have a part of, because most of your members are not educated on that level, and make a whole bunch of rules about this blood thing. Okay, your rudimentary DNA test that is without question accepted should allow somebody qualified to do further DNA tests into your realm to give you the ability to effectively protect the members of your congregation, and especially the most vulnerable members, being children. There's another problem with this, because when you start getting people in a back room and hold on to them for hours or even question them at all, you're interfering with an investigation. You don't get to just be a police officer and go and question a child or a rape victim. You don't even get to be a nurse and be a part of the team that takes care of this kit that's part of the investigation. There are forensic nurses. There is special training for these particular assault crimes. And there's special training for speaking to children as an investigator and as a forensic psychologist, as a forensic nurse. There's special training for all of it. And you don't even have the first level. You're interfering with an investigation. You are obstructing an investigation. There are studies where children were put in a room and exposed to a situation, a completely benign situation. And then somebody came in, sat down, like so they did something, and then they left and had really no contact with the children. And through questioning multiple times and posing things various ways, they were able to influence these children without even directly saying anything about it, to come up with a completely different version of what happened. You are not qualified to talk to anyone. There's a reason why they say not to question anyone, let alone children. About these situations, because they need to be able to get this information quickly while it's still fresh, before the amnesia of trauma sets in, before it's contaminated and people start asking questions and their brain starts trying to fill in the blanks with suggestive questions and information that you present to them. And the way that you guys ask questions imposes the trauma that would trigger this. You guys are screwing things up when you have much more qualified people who can do these questions and the DNA test, and it would be legal. It would be completely legal. These guys want to protect the congregation, apparently more so than you, or at least the governing body, because the governing body has a protocol for when somebody interrupts a meeting. You don't have to call the service department and make sure that you're complying with the laws in your area. The laws for interrupting a religious service could be different in different parts of the world, in different states, in different communities. And yet there's a general protocol that we've seen. You're revoking their invitation. You're asking them to leave. Don't touch them. Call the police. There's no phone call to the service department. None. But for child abuse, the first thing you do is call the service department, and you don't even get the guy's name that gives you your advice. How right does that sound to you? If your job is to protect the congregation, what are you protecting them from at that point, if this is the logic that we're using? I've had clients from a lot of different backgrounds and spoken to a lot of different people. It's only a matter of time before this bites you in the butt, number one. So you need to fix it. Number two, you're not protecting Jehovah's name. When you have an assault victim or even a child, they don't go around with the bullhorn through the hospital and the newsroom saying, we have a Jehovah's Witness here. No. According to the forensic nurses I've spoken to, these are extremely, extremely confidential cases, extremely sensitive cases. These are extremely confidential, more so than yours. You're confidential. The reason why it's making it to the news is because of outrageously immoral it has been handled. How dangerously it's been handled, and somebody wants to protect somebody else. They are sacrificing their own confidentiality to try and protect another human being. They're putting themselves through the trauma to try and protect another human being. That is why it is being called out now. You're not being persecuted. Somebody wants to protect another human being from the trauma that they have to live with for the rest of their life. That's why it's being called out, because of how outrageously immoral it is. It is not because you reported it. It doesn't become an issue until somewhere down the line, somebody opens up about how traumatic and outrageously immoral it was handled by you. When it's being handled by the police and the nurses, nobody's running around with a bullhorn. Now, if you can delve into the medical world and make a whole bunch of haphazard rules that really don't make sense to me, because some parts of blood are allowed, but other parts aren't. But the scripture says not to partake, period, according to you. But you can delve into the medical world and do all this because you're working with qualified people and this is what you came up with together. Why won't you partner with qualified people in the investigative process? Why are you obstructing justice? Why are you not reporting it immediately and getting these people in with the right people? Why are you not involving the qualified people? Because everything that you are qualified to do scripturally can be done from the visitor side of the table. I repeat, it can be done from the visitor side of the table at the prison. You're missing nothing. You are wasting time to protect the congregation and the community at large. You're obstructing their investigation. You're hindering it. And like I said, it's only a matter of time before this mess catches up with you, and you need to fix it. And I just gave you your reason why. Because we all know you don't need 2 witnesses if his sister comes up pregnant. You don't even have to know who daddy is. If she's not married and she comes up pregnant, period, point blank. Nobody says anything. Nobody confesses anything. Nobody even knows anything until she's got that little bubble. That little baby belly bubble. And you can disfellowship her. That's a rudimentary DNA test. If you can delve into the medical world, you can involve the investigative world, because your scriptural investigation, you do other things that are freaking illegal. You stalk. You've got people like hacking into like personal data. You got elderettes. It's not illegal. You got elderettes approaching people, trying to get them to say too much. You do illegal things, and yet you're not involving the legal entities. You got to stop. Get these professionals involved immediately. Like, your logic is not making sense. But I'm done ranting. And if you don't want to face these consequences, like I said, I worked with some hella people at one of my jobs. They were my clients. It's only a matter of time, because they're getting smarter about this, and they're coming up with better ways to pin you down to these crimes. And you need to stop. For your own sake and the children. Thanks.